Ms. Casey.
I move that we approve the appointment of Tasha Ray Martinez as Finance Director.
There's a motion on the floor by Ms. Casey. Second, please.
Second, Mr. Mayor.
2 seconds. Second by Mr. Ulibarri. Roll call, please.
Counselor Romero?
Yes.
Counselor Casey?
Yes.
Counselor Olivari? I have a motion by Counselor Casey, a second by Counselor Olivari and Counselor Romero. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Motion carries.
Thank you. Welcome, Tasha. Appreciate it very much. Next order of business.
Order is item 3, discussion consideration of the Samaritan House contract. We have our city manager, Mr. Maestas.
And you also have some comments by Councilman Montoya.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll go ahead and read those into the record. Hello, Mayor and Councilors. If there is a motion to give funding to the Samaritan House, I would ask that you consider making sure that the funding is specifically toward direct services. There also needs to be accountability within the contract that makes sure that the citizens of Las Vegas are safe, as well as the clientele that utilize the Samaritan House. This is why we have asked for video cameras in public spaces and visits from public safety officers as well as the fire department personnel to ensure that our homeless population also have safeguards in place to protect them. I also ask that the contract consider a financial report to the city manager on a monthly basis. I thank you for your consideration. Respectfully, Councilor Michael Montoya.
Thank you. Mr. Maestas.
Mayor and Councilor, we have before you the amended or the updated Samaritan House contract that was brought forth in the last 2 council meetings for your approval or discussion.
I have a question, Mr. Maestas. Was this contract reviewed by legal?
Yes, sir,
Thank
it
you.
has.
Mr. Mayor, I move approval of the Samaritan House contract.
There's a motion on the floor to approve the contract with Samaritan House. Second.
Second, Mr. Mayor.
Second by Mr. Ulibarri.
Mr. Mayor, I have questions.
Mr. Romero.
Mr. Maestas, on this contract, the one that we got last meeting to the updated one, and I know before they were outlined as to the changes that the attorney recommended. Well, I mean, what Samaritan House had submitted, but what were the changes that the attorney made?
I believe one of the changes was taking a city official off of the Samaritan House board was one of the recommendations by our attorney.
Was the only recommendation.
Yes.
Okay. And I guess my other question, in the updated contract, and I guess I'll say this first. Upon this, I know I did in one of the sessions ask that the concerns that we had here on council be mentioned in this updated contract, and none of that was added into it. As a matter of fact, it remained removed, pertaining to the, and maybe this is where this language came in. I take it a little differently, where item D on the scope of work, where it says twice monthly for 30 to 45 minutes, Samaritan House will open a Zoom session for updates to the public on the most recent efforts to combat addiction, stigma, and mental illness in San Miguel County, and to ask questions of the experts. What I read into that language is that the concerns of the neighborhood, about people sleeping in their lawns, the different issues, yes, the issues from some of those clients can be mental illness, but what I read from this language in this contract is that basically the neighbors should tune in and be able to adjust to the mental illness in the community, so just settle with it, but let us teach you, how to deal with this, instead of Samaritan's House's role in, if there's people sleeping on their sidewalk, they should be encouraging them to come inside and not just let them pop tents and do all that. Same thing in the park. So I take that language as basically a dig to my constituents in my ward that's saying, you know what, the way we're going to help you is by teaching you how to deal with mental illness. And I don't agree with that. Again, I say in this contract here, there's no language that protects my constituents, and I totally have a heart for the homeless, and I suggested some other language to be included in this that wasn't taken into consideration. And I just want to note for the record, I don't support that because my constituents were not taken into consideration in this contract. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor,
Thank you. Ms. Casey?
the way I read that item is that it says Samaritan House will open the Zoom session for updates to the public on the most recent efforts to combat addiction. I don't think that's saying that the people have to learn methods to combat addiction. I think that's saying the Samaritan House will report to the people via Zoom what they are doing to combat addiction and, work with the clients at Samaritan House so that, they get the help that they need. That's the way I read it. So I don't think it's telling people you have to learn how to deal with it or too bad. I think it's saying we will let you know what we're doing to deal with it so that people know what's going on. If I live in an area and growing up, the alley by my mother's and grandmother's house is directly connected to the state hospital. And so every day was a new adventure. And so we would find people from the state hospital in our kitchen eating food, or we found one man that had stolen wigs from somebody else's house and was sitting there putting on my mother's makeup and, combing his hair in the bathroom. And so, we would just call this, the state hospital and say, we have, a couple of your patients here, can you come and get them? I think the Samaritan House is making an offer to the people saying, we want to let you know what we're doing about this, which is something that we never got when I was growing up from the state hospital. Nobody ever said, somebody walked away, kind of keep an eye out for them. Nothing. We just found them on our own and dealt with it as best we could. I don't think the Samaritan House is doing that at all. I think they're saying, we're going to let you know what we're doing. We have, social workers, or we have them, dealing with a mental health counselor or whatever it is, and let people know so that they know that Samaritan House is doing their part within the community.
And I
Mr. Pastor Sice or Pastor Paul would like to address that or not, or just.
I do. I believe it's an attempt for transparency. They were just open to the community, plus the 24-hour hotline that I think is still in the contract. But we had offered to have a 24-hour hotline for your constituents to be able to call in. So it's just an attempt for us to be transparent with the community.
So, quick question, Mr. Mayor. Chief, this updated contract, were you able to look at it, being that you deal with public safety
I'm actually reading through it.
right now? That
Yes.
answers my question. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
So there's a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Counselor Olivari?
Yes.
Counselor Casey?
Yes.
Counselor Romero? No?
No, and not that I don't care for the homeless, just the concerns of my constituents were not addressed in this contract, and I feel that they were disrespected, and I just hate that, hopefully you guys don't have to deal with this. Thank you.
I have a motion by Counselor Casey, a second by Counselor Olivari. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Motion carries.
Thank you. Next order of business, please.
Moving on to item number 4, request approval of Resolution 2259, a budget adjustment for fiscal year 2022-2023. We have our interim finance director, Dominic Chavez.
Hello again, Mayor and Council.
Welcome, Dominic. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm here to seek approval for Resolution 2259, City of Las Vegas and making a budget adjustment to the 22-23 fiscal year budget to include, my apologies for that.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to approve Resolution 22-59.
There's a motion on the floor by Mr. Romero. Second, please.
Second, Mr. Mayor.
Second by Mr. Ulibarri. Roll call, please.
Counselor Casey? Yes. Counselor Romero? Yes. Counselor Olivari?
Yes.
I have a motion by Counselor Romero, a second by Counselor Olivari. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Motion carries.
We didn't shut you up. We just,
Much appreciated.
thank you, Dominic.
I have to read through that whole thing, you know?
Yeah, I appreciate all your work.
Appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna.
Next order of business is discussion direction on public input for city council meetings. Mr. Mayor?
Thank you. When the pandemic started, and our chambers were closed to the public, people were not attending our meetings, and so we made sort of an effort to entertain public input by members of the public, that they would be able to submit this electronically. Now, this was strictly just as a COVID measure. Since we've opened up the gallery to public meetings, we invite people to come and participate in public input. And so I want to hold a discussion regarding whether we continue the practice of accepting electronic public comments, or if we stop that and have people attend the meeting to provide public comment. I'll open the floor for discussion.
Mr. Mayor,
Barbara?
I believe that this is on the agenda because of my concern of disenfranchising the citizenry. If people are not able to attend a meeting because of illness or lack of transportation or whatever reason they might have, I don't think that we should hold them to having to be here only in person. I think that that's a disservice to the community. I think that, I know that there was a concern about some of the emails that had come in, that there's no way for us to know if that person really exists or not, or somebody's using somebody else's name and making something up about, they don't like the police chief, or they don't like me, or they don't like, Leo or whatever, and complaining about things within the city. But we can overcome that if we take emails only that have a full name, a physical address, a phone number, where that person can be called to verify that they're the ones that wrote the email. If an email comes in with one of those items missing, that will not be read into the record. If there's a question, then Cassandra or someone in the city clerk's office could call and say, are you Barbara Perea? Do you live at such and such a place? Is this, obviously if they answer the phone, that's their phone number. Did you write an email to the city saying, complaining about whatever? Or just, discussing an item that's on the agenda? If they say no, then you don't read it. If they say, yes, I wrote that, I want it read into the record, then it's read into the record. But that person has the opportunity to give their input to the governing body as to how they feel about a certain issue. And while I understand that the Open Meetings Act does not require public comment, it is highly and strongly recommended by every attorney general that I have ever worked with to allow public comment at a meeting so that people feel that they have a voice in government. And I would like to keep that voice not only being made in person, but also have people write in their concerns and let their input be known to the governing body.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Mayor?
I guess I'm gonna have to disagree with you, Councilor Casey. I mean, in today's technology, I could create a phone number, I could create my own name, Cassandra could call me on a number that I create on an app and say, I'm Mr. Smith. And I could say, yes, I'm Mr. Smith. I live at an address, and create an email that can blast every single one of us here. And I think that's not fair. I think we have counselors' reports that if we feel that there's a concern that we want to bring up and we want to use their name and they send us an email, I think that's already in place and we could bring it up at that point. It just, I don't, believe me, I'm in, total support of transparency. I was a school board member that I brought in about, public input, recording the meetings and stuff at West Las Vegas. It just, I think we've come to an era in our time and technology that people like to hide behind computer screens and phone numbers and masked, there's a term for it, and I think that, honestly, I think we've had some of that already in some of the public input that we received. I think if you have something to say, you make an effort. I understand if they're sick, but I think us as counselors, if they strongly feel that they have to, tell us something, they could send us an email. We have that option, and during counselors' reports, we could bring that up. I just believe that having it open just leads to, stuff that people won't come and say openly without saying who they are and using their real name, and it's just my opinion, and I think public input should be the way it was prior to COVID, and if you have something to say, you come say it. If not, we'll bring it up in our counselors' reports. That's just my 2 cents.
The other issue, Mr. Mayor, I really dislike this thing here. Sorry, the microphone just turns off whenever it wants to, and I have to tap it, hold it, and look at it, I guess. Nice. Sorry, I know, it's like, Dios mío de mi vida. Okay, anybody that writes something has to also, we need to let the public know that there are rules of decorum. So somebody sends an email and they say, I really hate the city manager, or the chief of police isn't doing his work, or why don't the EMTs follow all the ambulances everywhere they go, or whatever. They cannot, there are rules of decorum so that they cannot name anybody specifically by name. They can't say Maria Galveri, isn't doing her job because my water line broke, That will not be read into the record. People need to understand that there are rules on how to address their issues without demeaning anyone, without disparaging anyone, without embarrassing anyone, and without pinpointing anyone that is associated with the city, anyone who works for the city, anyone who is associated with the city as an elected official, or police chief, or whatever it happens to be. So there are rules, and sometimes we get people that come in here and talk in person, and they are not aware of those rules of decorum, and they just, say, well, so-and-so, isn't doing his job, and so-and-so was rude, or so-and-so did this, and that's worse to me than to have somebody send in an email that can be checked, and maybe there is somebody that is technologically advanced enough to create a fake phone number and a name and be able to send an email, but I still don't think that that would be the norm. And so I really would like to see us be able to accept both public comments in person and via email, if they specify, as I mentioned, their full name, physical address, and telephone number.
Did you have?
So Councilor Casey, how would we do, once we have an email, I guess my question would be to Cassandra, because then it could be interpreted that you're let's say somebody writes something like that, then you're limiting their public comment. So we really, I mean, if we're gonna go that case, you're gonna have to be very specific on what she can and cannot read, because then somebody could come and file and say, Cassandra, you limited my public comment, you restricted, you didn't say what I wanted you to say, so it just opens up a can of worms that I think that it's not even just my 2 cents. Cassandra, what do you think?
If you have something that says public comments can be made in person or via email, providing that the email comments do not mention anyone specifically by name and no disparaging remarks are made, those will not be read into the record, period. Then Cassandra doesn't have to follow what they say. They have to follow the rules. And the rules are, if you say something nasty about somebody, you're not gonna get your email read, period.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Ulibarri.
I think that if any public input's gotta be on the agenda items that we have on every council meeting, and if they wanna speak about the agendas, that's what we should talk about, nothing else.
Is that in person or is that even on email? Are you okay?
We're good. Well,
So what's the direction of the council to the clerk? And I'd like to hear from Cassandra.
Mr. Mayor, so in the rules of decorum, it already states that only items on the agenda can be discussed. So that's already in your own rules. So those are the only ones that I will read into the record, and those are the ones I used to read into the record when we had it through via email as well. So I don't know what the direction of the council is, or the consensus is, but either way, I mean, I can read it into the record if that's a consensus. I'm not sure about calling each person. You know, if it's something on that's on the agenda and they have a name to it, then I would read it into the record if that's the wish of the council. I don't know if we, you know, should go that far as to calling each person to verify.
And even if you do, if they have a fake number, they're gonna say, yeah, I'm Mr. Smith. And I mean, if you're opening it, you're opening the floodgates, and just be prepared.
I'm not saying that you need to call every single one, but if there's one that's questionable, that they're saying, you know, something about, you know, I turned in a NIPR request and the city clerk never bothered to do anything with it, and, you know, Cassandra Fresca should be fired or whatever, then that is something that should be read into the record because it's disparaging you. Okay. So, and then you would call that person and say, either rewrite it and leave, you know, people's name out and send another one, or it's not going to be read into the record. And we just need to let people know that.
I would also recommend that we get legal counsel on this. You know, send a question to legal counsel regarding this to see if how a record could be authenticated, you know, verified. I mean, when people come and speak here, we don't ask them for an ID and say, let me see your ID to make sure your name is Mark Size, you know.
Yeah, I didn't bring my ID with me.
And you know, so I definitely would like to get legal counsel on this. I have a feeling they're not going to want us to do it by email. That's my.
And then that's what I say, if we're gonna do it, we just basically do it the way we've been doing. If they send it, they read it, and, because if you kind of put restrictions, I think we're running that fine line of you're limiting what I say, what I cannot say. It's if we're gonna allow it, and I think Councilor Ulibarri said he was okay, and Councilor Casey said yeah, so we just, if they send the email, you read it, and that's it.
I would still recommend legal counsel. I have a feeling that legal counsel will say that we shouldn't accept electronic public input. That's just my opinion, only because of all the cyber, you know, stuff that's going on, and I sort of have a feeling without a proper way of authenticating an email, I would I strongly would think that the attorney would say no. But run it up the flagpole, see what you say. For now, let's continue to receive electronic public comments. And also, if I may, we also need to let the public know that which ones are going to be omitted. You know, the decorum, that you have to list a phone number, an address, you know, something that validates your identity, with your email, or they will not be read. So we need some education to the public as to how to submit electronic for now. But I'm almost sure the attorney's going to say no. But I'm not an attorney, so. Is that clear, Cassandra?
Yes, is that the consensus of the, as a whole?
I think that would be good,
Okay.
to get some legal direction, I guess. I probably won't agree with it, but that's okay,
That's fine.
yeah.
And at this point, we'll go ahead and accept until we hear back from the attorney. Well, we might hear from him prior to the next meeting, so. Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Thank you, Cassandra. What are your concerns as a clerk, receiving electronic public input? You're a certified clerk?
Mayor, can I make a comment real quick on that?
Yes.
Puts her in a predicament to read some of this stuff that's emailed, puts her, I mean, she has to read it, right?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure some of those were uncomfortable reading.
They were, some are. But, I mean, I state who they're from, you know, for the record, and I read it just as they write it, so. I don't have a problem with that either, but it's up to the council.
Okay. Thank you, Cassandra. Thank you, council.
And that concludes our business items.
Mayor, I move that we adjourn.
There's a motion on the floor to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting's adjourned. Happy holidays, everybody. And welcome, Tasha. Congratulations.